There are some memories that feel so real. They refuse to die even when reality disagrees, and that's where the story begins. Not with science, not with psychology, but with certainty. The kind that keeps you awake at night. The kind that makes you quietly ask, why am I so sure of something that apparently never happened? That's the Mandela Effect, a mystery that lives between truth and belief, where thousands, sometimes millions of people recall the same memory. Yet history claims it never existed. And here's the question that refuses to disappear. How can so many strangers with different lives, different countries, different cultures remember the same mistake? The phenomenon got its name for one unsettling reason. People from around the world remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. Not thought he died, remembered it. They remember news reports, reactions, speeches. They remember the feeling, yet Mandela didn't die in prison. He walked free, became president, and lived until 2013. So how do you explain this? A coincidence? A global hallucination? Or a sign that we may not live in a single stable reality? Some call it a psychological glitch. Some call it bad memory. Others believe it's something else, something we aren't supposed to understand yet. But this is where the real story starts to twist, because memory isn't random. Memory is precise. And when millions of unrelated people remember the same exact error, we have two choices. Call it mass confusion, or consider the possibility that our memory sometimes reaches into places that don't belong to this version of reality. Most people brush it off until it happens to them. A moment hits like lightning, when something you know to be true suddenly isn't. A line you swear existed, a logo that doesn't look right, a detail in history that shifted, and it feels like a personal attack, not on what you know, but on what reality used to be. That's when the room feels too quiet. That's when your heartbeat sounds louder. That's when you wonder, did reality change, or did I just arrive here too late? The strange part is this: the Mandela Effect is stubbornly specific, not just general confusion, not simple memory failure. Psychology explains average mistakes, vague recollections, misquotes. But that's not what happens here. These memories are vivid, detailed, emotional. And that's the riddle. Why are the false memories emotionally strong? Why are they often tied to childhood? Why are they sometimes associated with grief or fear or loss? Emotion is powerful. Emotion stamps memory. So if millions of people share these same emotional memories, what exactly are they remembering? Here's a detail psychology often forgets. Memory is never neutral. We don't just store facts, we store feelings, meaning, context. The moment something feels important, it gets marked, highlighted, saved. If the Mandela Effect was simply confusion, why would people defend their memory with passion? Why does it feel personal, even sacred to so many? Why does it feel like something was stolen? And maybe that's the real key. Memory isn't just about the past, it's about identity. What you remember becomes who you are. Your childhood, your experiences, your personal timeline. So when reality disagrees with your memories, it feels like more than being wrong. It feels like reality just rewrote your past without asking permission. And maybe that's why the Mandela Effect makes people uncomfortable. Not because it's confusing, but because it suggests one terrifying possibility. What if the timeline isn't locked? What if the past is flexible? What if we have experienced more than one version of reality? But before jumping to quantum theories and parallel universes, we have to ask the simplest question first. Why do so many strangers from distant places share identical false memories? There's no forum that existed decades ago, no global rumor before the internet, and yet people remember the same details. This means one thing: the Mandela Effect existed before communication, which means it may not come from gossip. It may come from something deeper, something already inside us. The world is layered with mysteries, but this one hits close, too close. Because unlike UFO sightings or paranormal stories, this one involves you. Your childhood, your certainty, your confidence in your own memory. Most people discover the Mandela Effect by accident. They're reading something online, they see a reference, they pause, they think, wait, That's not right. They look it up. They search for proof. And suddenly, they feel like they're standing at the edge of a cliff because nothing matches what they know. That moment, that drop in the stomach, that instant of dizziness is the first real sign that something inside reality might be slipping. Is this simply the brain misfiring? Maybe, but that doesn't explain something deeper. The questions people start asking afterward. Why do family members disagree about things that supposedly happened? Why do groups of friends swear they remember the same event the same way, even when it never occurred? Why does history feel unstable? Why does memory sometimes feel more real than reality itself? It's as if memory and reality are two separate layers, usually aligned, but occasionally one drifts away from the other. Many psychologists argue that this is all normal. Memory is imperfect. Humans are prone to suggestion. We fill in gaps without knowing. And yes, this is true. The brain is not a perfect recorder. But here's where the psychological explanation hits a wall. If the Mandela Effect was due to normal memory errors, why would people from entirely different countries who never spoke to each other make the same exact mistake? Why would they remember the same words, the same endings, the same scenes? This is not typical memory failure. This looks like patterned deviation, a specific shift that repeats across minds. That is why some neuroscientists and philosophers have begun asking a forbidden question: what if memory is not stored completely inside the brain? What if memory is partly external? What if we tap into a field, a structure, a database of reality, and occasionally something in that field changes? In that moment, the past feels unstable because the reference point has shifted. It sounds wild, but not as wild as what we already know. Time slows near gravity wells, particles teleport, observation can change the outcome of experiments, space bends, energy flickers in and out of existence. Reality itself already behaves like it's under construction. So is it really impossible that memory, the way we anchor ourselves in time, might not be fixed either? The Mandela Effect may not be proof of alternate realities, but it might be evidence of something equally unsettling: that our version of reality is not complete, that our senses only show us a filtered layer, not the full architecture, and memory might occasionally slip through that filter. The more we study the brain, the more it misbehaves. Memory is not recorded, it is reconstructed, rewritten. Every time we remember, we modify. That's neuroscience. That's fact. So if memories can change, is it possible that sometimes the world changes too? This video will not tell you what to believe, but it will tell you something far more valuable. Certainty is dangerous, because when we assume reality is stable, we close our eyes to the possibility that it might be shifting right now, that the truth you cling to, the past you know, might be part of a version that once existed, or maybe still does, somewhere in this universe or the next one, waiting for someone like you. Memory feels like a treasure vault, a place where everything that shaped us remains untouched, waiting to be replayed with perfect clarity. But neuroscience tells a colder truth. Memory isn't recorded, it's reconstructed. Every time you remember something, you edit it, you rewrite the past. Each memory is a remix, not a photograph. And that means something frightening. Your most sacred memories may never have existed the way you think they did. The brain doesn't store the past, it rebuilds it every time you try to look back. Let that settle. It means when you remember your childhood, your first love, your greatest fear, even your happiest moment, you don't retrieve a file. You create one. You recreate it using fragments, bits of emotion, patterns of logic, expectations of how life should have gone. Your memories feel certain only because they feel familiar, but familiar does not always mean accurate. And that's why false memories are not bugs in the system, they are the system. When scientists first discovered this, they didn't celebrate, they hesitated because they realized something deeply uncomfortable. If memory is rebuilt, then identity is rebuilt. Who we think we are might just be a story the brain keeps rewriting until we finally believe it. That means the past isn't stored, It's performed. The brain is less like a storage device and more like a storyteller rehearsing its favorite lines. But here's the twist. Storytellers do not aim for accuracy. They aim for meaning. To the brain, truth is negotiable, meaning is not, and that changes everything. Think about this. When you struggle to remember something, a face, a street, a conversation, notice what happens. Your brain doesn't wait. It guesses. It fills in gaps. It reconstructs a scene from expectations. I think I said this. I probably walked there. Maybe she replied like this. You're not lying. You're improvising. You're reconstructing a memory using available ingredients: logic, emotion, belief, context. This is why eyewitness testimony, once considered reliable, is now treated with caution in courts. Two people can see the same event, yet describe two completely different realities. That doesn't mean they're dishonest. It means their brains prioritize different details while filling in the rest. Every brain edits. Every mind rewrites. The truth is simple. Memory is not about preserving the past. It's about surviving the present. Imagine if your brain recorded every single detail of every day, every texture, breath, sound, shadow, heartbeat. You wouldn't survive. The human mind was built for compression, to shrink life into manageable fragments. The brain doesn't store accuracy, it stores importance. It remembers what helps you live, what teaches you, what hurts you, what warns you. So the past we remember is not the past we lived. It's the past our brain decided was useful, and useful is not the same as real. Let me show you how strange this gets. Scientists tested memory with a simple experiment. They showed people a list of related words: tired, drowsy, dream, pillow, blanket, rest. But the word sleep was never shown. Yet when asked to recall the list, over 60% of participants confidently remembered seeing the word sleep, even though it was never there. It's called the Diess-Rodiger-McDermott effect, a fancy name for one stunning truth. Your brain doesn't wait for reality. It predicts. It assumes. It fills in the missing pieces before you even know they're missing. Because the brain's primary job is not to record, but to anticipate, to forecast what must have been there. This keeps us alive, but it also means the line between reality and prediction is not as solid as we think. And this is where things start to echo the Mandela Effect. Because if memory is edited and rebuilt, then what happens when millions of people edit it the same way? How can strangers from different cultures, different languages, different decades misremember identical things? The simplest explanation is psychology. But psychology doesn't fully explain synchronization. Memory is personal, yet somehow the mistakes are shared. Is that a coincidence, or a sign that memory is partly collective? There are theories, unproven but fascinating. Some cognitive scientists propose that memory is not fully contained within the brain. It might extend into environment, into language, even into society. They call it distributed cognition, a fancy term for something very human. We think together. Our minds sync through culture, through symbols, through repetition. We don't just store information, we inherit it. Culture becomes memory. Memory becomes belief. Belief becomes fact. But what if this goes deeper than psychology? What if memory isn't just connected to culture? What if it's connected to reality itself? The more we study memory, the weirder it gets. For example, when you learn something, your neurons physically change shape. They grow new branches, new synapses, new patterns. But when you forget, the pattern doesn't completely vanish. Some parts remain, like footprints in soft sand, as if the memory is waiting for enough information to reassemble itself again. So the past lingers, even when you think it's gone. And this opens a question most scientists avoid. Is memory stored or accessed? Is the brain like a hard drive or a radio receiver? Does your memory come from inside you or through you? Think of what déjà vu feels like. A place you swear you've seen. A moment that feels like a repeat. A conversation that seems like it already happened before it began. Science calls it temporal lobe misfiring. a glitch where memories and perception become briefly unsynchronized. But that explanation only describes how it happens, not why it feels sacred, why it feels like life is momentarily unfolding on top of itself, like two timelines overlapping. Could it be that memory sometimes leaks? Could déjà vu be the system blinking? Could forgotten realities echo inside the present one? Maybe. Or maybe the truth is more humbling, that the brain is always under construction, that life doesn't keep its past in storage, it keeps it alive by constantly rebuilding it. Let's go deeper. When you remember something, your brain does something shocking. It temporarily destabilizes the memory. It weakens it. It makes it vulnerable so that it can be edited. Then it restabilizes it with the new edits included. This process is called reconsolidation. So technically, every time you remember something, you are erasing the original. You aren't remembering the event, you're remembering the last time you remembered it. Your past is not a timeline, it's a series of drafts. And that means we don't live in the past, we live in the latest version of it. Do you see how this connects to the Mandela Effect? If memory is fluid and rewritten, then the past becomes negotiable. And if millions of people rewrite in a similar way, the illusion of a collective false memory appears. But maybe false memory is the wrong phrase. Maybe our memory reflects a dynamic world, one that reshapes with every observation. Maybe memory errors are not proofs of failure, but signals of adaptability. Maybe the brain is not built to defend the past, but to improvise the future. Imagine reality is a river, always flowing, but memory is a painter, constantly repainting the water to make it look still. We crave stability, we beg for certainty, closure, conclusions, but nature seems to prefer flux, change, evolution. So maybe memory is the art of freezing motion, and sometimes nature wins. There is a lesser-known concept in neuroscience called source confusion. It happens when the brain remembers information, but forgets where it came from. You may recall a sentence, a melody, an idea, and be convinced it was your thought. You may recall a moment and be convinced it was real, but the source disappears, lose the source, and suddenly facts become beliefs. Beliefs become facts. Without source, reality becomes a canvas, and memory becomes the painter. That means our most cherished memories might not belong to us. They may be recycled thoughts, cultural echoes, social artifacts, traces of stories passed down, reshaped, retold. But to the brain, truth doesn't matter. What matters is coherence. If it feels right, it becomes right. So when we examine the Mandela Effect, we shouldn't just ask, why do people remember wrong? We should ask, why does the memory feel so right? Here's one answer. Memory feels real because it is emotional. Emotion stamps the brain with intensity. The more powerful the emotion, the deeper the engraving. That's why so many Mandela Effect memories seem to come from childhood. Those years are emotionally supercharged, filled with wonder, fear, excitement, confusion. Childhood isn't just when we learn, it's when we feel the most. And emotion, simply put, is gasoline for memory. It burns things into us. So if something felt familiar, felt true, felt part of the story of who we are, the brain may fight to keep it, even if reality doesn't agree. And the more we argue over the truth, the more our brain doubles down. That's why arguments about memory never end, because once memory attaches to identity, truth becomes personal, memory becomes sacred, and logic becomes irrelevant. So here we are, we stand in front of a mirror, asking it to show us who we were. But mirrors don't show the past, they show the present. And the present is always rewriting the past behind our backs. The Mandela Effect may not be evidence of alternate worlds, but it is evidence that memory is not under our control. And if memory shapes identity, then who we are is also not fully under our control. That's the real mystery. Not that we misremember reality, but that reality and memory are in negotiation. The brain bends, the mind adapts, reality updates. So maybe this is the question that matters most. If memory is not stored but generated, if memory is not recorded but rendered, then what exactly are we? Maybe we are not guardians of truth. Maybe we are authors of it, writing what must be written to survive the story we're living in. And in a world like that, the Mandela Effect is not a glitch. It's a reminder, a whisper from the unknown saying, the past is not finished, you are still writing it. What if the Mandela Effect is not the failure of memory, but the echo of another you, another life, another version, another timeline, just close enough to touch, then slip away the moment you try to remember? This is where things get uncomfortable, because science, real science, has accidentally opened a door that philosophy has only dreamed of. A door where logic bends, memory gets suspicious, and reality itself stops behaving like a solid object and starts acting more like a suggestion. Welcome to the quantum world, where certainty dies and probability takes the throne. We like to think the universe is solid, consistent, that there is one version of everything. But at the smallest levels, beneath atoms, reality acts like it's undecided. A quantum particle doesn't sit in one place. It exists in multiple possibilities at once, a map of potential outcomes. Only when we observe it does it choose one, not because it wanted to,